The last year or so, you've had a whole bunch of police and prosecutors and members of the white media who have been desperately, pathetically trying to prop up some talking point that, the police, they're going to be scared to do their jobs. They got one of the safest jobs in America. They run around with a gun, a stun gun, a baton, a radio, pepper spray, handcuffs, and an attack dog. I mean, for God's sake, if you're too scared to do your job under those circumstances, you're just a congenital coward. Oh, wait. Well, if you're really that worried, allow Professor Black Truth to give you some helpful advice. It's been my experience that police departments that don't gun down unarmed people, they don't get protested very often. Cops who don't assault or kill people, they don't get prosecuted. So if you really don't like what's going on, all I can say is tough. Obey the law and nothing would happen. In the last year or so, there's been a new trend that's begun to form with all of this lawlessness from America's police and sheriff's departments and the DAs and judges who had previously been making very clear they stood with the police in every killing of a black person. But the result of all of this wanton lawlessness promoted by the police and the DAs and the judges is that now a new trend has begun to take shape. And it's one that I guess nobody thought was going to happen. It's one that's getting a lot of attention in the media. And I'm not here to tell you one way or the other what anyone ought to do. I'm just here to tell you why this trend exists and what it is that people are saying about it. And the trend is there seem to be folks who are paying these cops who kill black people a house call. First, you had the worm, the murderer, the convicted scumbag, Derek Chauvin. You had black folks who showed up not just at the bastard's house, but also at his little winter residence that he had in Florida. I think his Asian wife got all of that. She divorced him, took everything that he had. Anything she didn't take, the state has taken. And you know that the police union's got to be more than a little bit disappointed. They spent $1 million trying to fund his defense. And all they have to show for it is a cute picture of him getting walked off in handcuffs. But when the people made it very clear that after years and years of watching as DAs and judges were thumbing their noses at the public and saying, well, you have to play by our rules, apparently the anger boiled over and people made it very clear, nah, it's pretty obvious there are no rules. So, since the law is not being obeyed by the very people who claim that they're supposed to be upholding the law, then the people are going to make sure that the carnage stops and that order is restored. The people are always the bastion of last hope. They are the effort of last resort whenever you have a society that's fallen into the hands of a murderous gang. So what happened was the people started going to the cops' houses. Starting with Derek Chauvin, but not ending there. You had the police chief of Houston, Art Acevedo, that little worm. He decided that he was going to sound off on that. This is disturbing. People are going to the cops' houses. That's disturbing. Well, what's disturbing about it? This is the public you're supposed to be serving. I mean, aren't cops always lecturing everybody about how we're here to serve and protect? Well, the public's sitting here lodging a complaint. You should be glad to see the public. I mean, unless you've done something wrong. No, the only cops who dislike the public, or the only cops who don't like it when the public has something to say, are the cops who have broken the law. That's been my experience. But Derek Chauvin was only the beginning of this trend. Next, you had that little white supremacist calling himself Jonathan Pentland. He used to be a soldier. I'm not sure if he is anymore, but apparently he was an instructor of sorts with the U.S. military. Now what he is on the run. He called himself bullying a black man who was walking through the neighborhood. And his little shrew of a wife called herself videoing the whole thing. Now, of course, you would think that after January 6th, these little inbreds would have learned you really don't want to video yourself doing these crimes. But that's the thing. They know that the sheriffs, the police, and the DAs and such are all on their side, or at least that's what they thought. And what they also thought was, oh, well, I'm insulated against punishment. Well, if by punishment you mean that the racist police or the racist sheriffs or what have you, that they're not going to hit you with any sort of hard penalties, well, if that's your idea of punishment, sure, but punishment doesn't just come from one source. It can come from a multitude of sources that you have absolutely no control over. And that's what old Pentland the skinhead found out the hard way when half the town showed up at his house. They got turned up, and next thing you know, he wound up running. Well, I guess he's going to have to get a new shirt. A lot of people in the military, especially the white supremacists, wear shirts that say, "These colors don't run." Yeah, well, he ran. And apparently he had to take his family with him. How very dignified. So they ran him not just off the block, they ran him out of the neighborhood. It wasn't the black man who got run out of the neighborhood, it was him. And now you got the police trying to calm things as, well, we've charged him. Not hard enough. You're giving him like some sort of little $500 fine. That ain't good enough. So the days of the police deciding, well, we're going to tell you whether or not we think he should be charged. The public deciding, nah, forget about that. This is what happens when the police and the DAs and the judges and the white media cheerlead and promote a culture of lawlessness. The murder of Mike Brown, that was lawlessness. The murder of Tatiana Jefferson, that's lawlessness. The murder of all the black victims of police violence at the hands of a bunch of white supremacists with badges, these are acts of lawlessness that erode and destroy whatever willingness the public is willing to put forward to, quote unquote, let the system work. But there is no such thing as a system. There's people who have decided that they're going to go in one direction or another. So nah, people just decided they had enough of it. And most recently, the murder of Dante Wright.
News of the manslaughter charge came as a ring of concrete and steel barricades went up outside the suburban home of 48-year-old Kim Potter. Officer Potter, her husband, and 2 sons moved out after their address was published online and threats were made to burn it down. Video obtained exclusively by DailyMail.com shows the barricades being erected, followed by taunts from a passing pickup.
Why are you not protecting a murderer?
They were apparently very concerned that Minnesota is becoming a very hot place for the white supremacists. People are not waiting to see if what concocted excuse the police are going to come up with. So what the folks decided to do was they said, well, you know what? We'll go ahead and visit her house too. Apparently the authorities decided we know how this is going to go. So they decided to call in a construction company, and the city had its own barricades, concrete barricades put in front of her house, and they put up fencing around her house. And according to the city of Champlin, they spent $9,000 just to put up the concrete barriers and the fencing at her house alone. No word on what the daily costs are. But that's what they said. A spokesperson for the city said that they're trying to seek reimbursement. They can start with the police union. Those scumbags are always good for the money. But that's what they did in the case of Kim Potter. They already decided, we saw what happened with Derek Chauvin, and we saw what happened with that Pentland character. We see a distinct pattern forming. By the way, they're not the only ones. The so-called prosecutor in Hennepin County, that guy, he wound up having to sell his house and leave. Yeah, what they're seeing is that because of the fact that they have created an utter and complete climate and atmosphere of lawlessness, the public's looking and going, well, hell, I guess it's up to us to stop the carnage. And it's also up to us to hold people responsible because the DAs, who watches the watchman? It's a question as old as any form of civic law enforcement. Who watches the watchman? In no other arena would somebody be allowed to say, well, I know I've been accused of wrongdoing, but I have investigated myself and I found that I did nothing wrong. That would never be allowed. And the reason that it happens is because you happen to have a number of people who have made up their minds that they're going to be using thugs with badges as an attack force to go after black people. And this is the response to it. When you have utter and complete lawlessness, there's going to be a reaction on the part of the people to restore, or in the case of the United States, to establish order. This country's never had order. Law and order, give me a break. You want law and order, you can take your white supremacist, raggedy, hairy Neanderthal behind over to China. China's got plenty of laws, and they got nothing but order, but they don't have any freedom or opportunities, except for a select few. No, if you're somebody who considers yourself to be moral, you don't talk about law and order, you talk about justice and accountability. See, a common dog in the street can understand little hindbrain, reptile-brained concepts like order. Ants crawling on the ground can understand order. But only men can understand justice. Only men can understand accountability. That's the sole domain of human beings because only human beings have critical thinking skills, most of us anyway, and can ascribe value to things. Human beings are not a bunch of lemmings. Lemmings and sheep, they understand order, and they'll follow each other right up into a slaughterhouse or right off a cliff. Human beings are supposed to think. So no, we don't do order. The order thing is what a slave does. When you are master of your own destiny, it's all about justice and accountability. And that's the two things the white supremacy doesn't have on the menu. But black empowerment's decided we're going to go ahead and take the menu and write it in. So this is what's happened now. The new trend has been formed. People are paying house calls on the police when they're accused of harming somebody because they have understood and seen the pattern that the DAs are not going to do anything. It's a game to them. The public are making it clear. It's not a game. Now, if the police do not like this, then it's time for them to examine their behavior. The public does not go marching on somebody's house without cause. They do it in response to an action. There is nobody in the public who can think that they would be seen to be shooting somebody dead in the streets and then, I get to go home as if nothing had happened. Everybody else is like, wait a minute here. How are you above the law? Well, we're the ones who decide who gets arrested. And the public's like, well, in that case, then two can play that game. See, the real problem that they have here is at the end of the day, and this is the reason why I did that video essay talking about soft power. White supremacy does not have enough guns, ain't got enough white supremacist males. They don't have enough will or resources to call themselves bringing in the guns all the time. At some point, they have to get the oppressed to go along with and to conform to their own oppression. They have to get you to just bow down and decide, well, I'm not going to do anything about it no matter how many times we get assaulted or killed. And when they've got you submitting to your own oppression, they don't need all the guns. They get to save a lot of money. Why the world should they be spending $9,000 to barricade the house of a killer when instead you'll hold yourself in check while they kill you all the livelong day? That's what they thought things were going to be. But what happened was people inevitably get tired of being ducks in a shooting gallery and they say, damn it, enough's enough. And that's what's happened here. The reaction that you've seen from the people, this is not lawlessness. This is the restoration of order. And what's happening is the police, for the longest time, they were thinking to themselves that maybe they could find a way to wriggle out of this. This is what the Chauvin verdict was really about. It's about trying to get the heat off of themselves and get people to go back to sitting on their hands and conforming to wait to see what the cops are going to do. Wait to see. You're going to go back to submitting and you blew off some steam and that's going to be the end of it, right? And they're like, no. What's going to happen is, as we saw with the case in Ohio, where the police shot that 16-year-old to death, you saw the cops immediately put out the video. We've gone from, you can't see the video at all. We've got laws that say you can't see the video to, please, hear the video. Look, she's got a knife. See, please. So as we see, the police have gone from defying the public to complying with the public. That's what we saw with Kim Potter. They went from, unless there's some protest and unless you guys are marching in front of the courthouse and unless there's just this big stink, we're not doing anything. They arrested her almost immediately. And the reason why, of course, is they have seen what can happen if they don't. They have understood that what's happening is if people are willing to go to the local police station and get turned up, what do you think is going to happen when they're coming to your houses? Obviously, the situation should never have had to get that far, but what happened was the police and the prosecutors, they decided that they were going to play a game of chicken with the country. They were going to play a game of chicken with the society. We're going to see which one of us blinks. Well, the citizens didn't blink. It's as I keep telling you, the only law is whatever the people are willing to obey. The operative term there being willing. Because at some point, people, if they just decide that the laws are disadvantageous towards them, they're just going to start ignoring them. If the people see injustice and lawlessness, and they see the very individuals who claim that they're supposed to be enforcing and upholding the law being the ones who are the criminal class of the society, then what's going to happen is the people are going to have a natural reaction of, we must have order, we must have something resembling civilization. I mean, for God's sake, nobody wants to live in a freaking meth-infested trailer park masquerading as a country. But that's what white supremacy has attempted to inflict upon the nation. And now you got people who are pushing back. The people know injustice. They know when the law has been broken. They also know, as we saw with the case of Breonna Taylor, you had that worm Daniel Cameron doing exactly what Bob McCullough did in the murder of Michael Brown, deciding that he was going to rig the grand jury and instruct them not to indict. And even if you do, well, I'm telling you right now, I'm the one handling the case, and I'll tell you right now, that's not going to stick. If you try to go for any harder charges, they wouldn't work, and I know they wouldn't work because I'm the one who'll make sure they don't work. You would never be successful. If you try to force me to actually prosecute these killers, well, I'll tell you right now, I don't think the case would actually work because I wouldn't even attempt to prosecute. That's what he made sure the message got across loudly and clearly. So what happened was the jurors said, you know what, to hell with the law that says we can't say anything, we're speaking out. So what the white supremacists, especially the ones with badges, are finding out is the people are no longer deciding that they're going to sit on their hands and see if the white supremacists punish each other. That is the restoration of order. That is when justice is being established. Justice is the righting of a wrong. And if the system decides, well, we're not accountable to the people, then it is imperative that the people make the system accountable. There is no law, and even if there was a law that said that you have to submit to oppression, only a fool would actually do that. You do not sit on your hands while you're being killed, while you're being assaulted, and somebody's trying to establish the principle that you should be killed or assaulted with impunity. And the individuals who do it, well, at most they'll get a slap on the wrist. No, justice has not been done until the people say it has been done. There's an old saying that it is not enough for justice to be done. Justice must be seen to have been done. In other words, it's not enough for you to say, well, we did justice in this case. It's only justice when the people look and say, okay, we are satisfied with the sentence that has been imposed. Unless the people are satisfied with it, you can go ahead and try all you want to do half measures and, we think Amber Geiger's 5 years in that little artificial ceiling that they were trying to put in place, that little artificial maximum sentence. That's the reason why you had Ben Shapiro, who was all butthurt. And by the way, I don't know what alien world that little scumbag came from, but I'm pretty sure that when he gets on his little flying broomstick or whatever the hell he uses to go back to his home world, and he can inform them, my attempts to subvert and infiltrate the human race have failed. Bzz. And because of that, I don't understand why. They just told me it was very weird. Bzz. But he was all butthurt because of the sentence that Chauvin the murderer is looking at. 40 years. I don't understand. 40 years. 40 years. That's excessive. I can understand other charges, but the other charges are excessive. I don't understand. There's my justice. He was all butthurt about it because he understands they've gone in only less than a year, gone from their artificial ceiling of 5 years being the max to 40 years overnight. And they're looking and going, this is a dangerous precedent. How can this be? Because once that's done, it's like, whoa, people are going to be expecting this all the time. And the people have shown that they're willing to take to the streets to make sure that gets done. You see, in any other instance, whether it's Hong Kong or the French Revolution or any sort of action that white supremacy approves of because it forwards and promotes their interests, they're fine with people taking to the streets. Hong Kong's got riots going on. Those are not uprisings over there. Those are mostly American and British-backed little riots that are taking place in Hong Kong. But they're fine with it because China's an economic rival and potentially a military rival on a long enough timeline. And this is an attempt to undermine the internal politics of China right in their own home. This ain't even on their doorstep. This is in their own home. Destabilize and undermine China, have a bastion of American-friendly Western capitalist dogma and strident Americanism, strident Westernism right there on China's shores. That's what this is meant to do. It's meant to tell China, we decide, we can influence what your politics are, and there's nothing you can do about it. So they're fine with riots as long as it's in their interest. But the second that you got people who are saying, hey, there's going to be uprisings, and what's the difference between a riot and an uprising? Well, I posted for you on Twitter what a riot is. You had 1,000 white kids at Oklahoma State University who overturned half a dozen cars, trashed the place for something that they call Crit Fest. Apparently they do this, I think it's annually. They get together to riot. The police didn't arrest anybody. They're breaking windows, trashing the place. It looks like a doggone hurricane passed through. That's a riot. An uprising is in response to injustice. People who are under threat, who have made it very clear we're throwing off the chains. Ain't going to be any more of these killings, no more summary executions, no more of these beatings and assaults without penalty or redress. We're throwing off the chains. That's an uprising. And how is white supremacy supposed to keep black people in check and keep black people submitted if they refuse to be submitted? How is white supremacy supposed to keep black people held down if black people make it clear, I'm rising up? The people have given the police and the DAs and the judges every opportunity that there is. In fact, they were too lenient. They let this go on for too long. And as a result, what finally happened is the inevitable. You've had white media outlets, including YouTube, who thought to themselves that if they just banned enough people, blocked enough people, if they just censored enough videos, that hopefully nothing would happen. Because as I keep telling you, behind every illegal and unconstitutional law, behind every illegal and unconstitutional court ruling, there is the credible threat of state-sanctioned violence. That's what the laws are, basically. The laws are, what are the things that white people in power have agreed upon that they'll call the police for to have them kill people if necessary in order to enforce? What are the things that we're willing to put the violence of the state behind? That's what the laws basically are. What are the things that we're going to put the violence of the state behind? And what's happening is the people are realizing that nobody's going to give them permission. Nobody's ever going to give you permission when they've been abusing you. They're never going to say, well, you have my permission now to live your life free from abuse, free from the threat of death, free from fear, free from harm, free from deprivation. Nobody's going to give you permission to live your life free. You got to take it. And you got to take it by making it very clear to the individuals who are attacking you and abusing you and depriving you of the formal opportunities that exist, to make it very clear. I'm not going to be deprived of what I should have, starting with my life and my safety and my security and peace of mind. And I'm prepared to fight for these things. When you make it very clear, I'm going to fight to make sure that I can live safely. I'm prepared to fight in order to make sure that nobody can kill me and that nobody can harm me. When that happens, all of a sudden these oppressors start asking, some new calculus has to take place. Because the old calculus was harming black people, killing black people was a victimless crime. You could do it for free. There was no cost to be paid. Now they're looking and going, man, you'll lose your job. They'll come to your house, so you'll lose your house. You'll lose your freedom. What else could you lose? They're not playing the game of, well, let's see if these guys are ever going to change. They're like, no, we're going to take control of the situation. So that's the new trend. That seems to be the new normal now. I mean, you saw what happened with that little skinhead Pentland. He's not a cop, but people went ahead and turned up at his home anyway. What was the first thing that happened? He ran. So it's not just the police who the people are making it clear they've had enough of. They've had enough of white supremacist violence, white supremacist lawlessness, and the people are restoring order. The people are restoring the rule of law. The people are restoring and establishing justice. That's what's happening here. And this is something that white supremacy didn't calculate having to contend with, because the old calculus was, we're getting it for free. Now they see it carries a heavy price. And what they're having to do is they're having to move from their position. Because it's a matter of, you call yourself defying the will of the people, well, this thing's not going to stop. I mean, when the prosecutor has to flee his home, that's when even the DAs are getting put on notice. But do not let anyone tell you that this is lawlessness. This is the very soul of law. This is the very soul of justice. Laws are not written for the benefit of a select few. I mean, they are in practice, but the concept of law is supposed to be the greatest good for the greatest number. And to decide that the laws are going to be made into an accomplice to murder, that's not law at all. That is anarchy. That is chaos. That is injustice. In other words, it's white supremacy. So as we can see with this Potter case, obviously the police and the cities are looking and going, well, we'll blow thousands of dollars to try to protect an empty house. She's already fled the freaking house, but we're trying to protect the house. Well, That horse already left the barn, but if it makes you feel better. This is the reason why racist DeSantis and his cronies, you had a whole bunch of white men, all of them with badges, calling themselves, putting a law in the books. No anti-rioting. Anything that has more than 3 people is considered a riot. Anything with 3 people? Well, in that case, then I see 3 cops standing around. That's a riot. That's what I'm seeing, a riot. Oh yeah, as far as they're concerned, this is nothing more than white supremacist posturing. It's gonna get knocked down as soon as it gets to a federal court. But the thing is, what they're basically doing is they're trying to keep the morale high, or at least they're trying to maintain something resembling morale for their white supremacist minions. They've been taking L's and they're getting more and more demoralized. And as they've seen, every time that they call themselves trying to stick their little chest out and pull something, what happens is the people as a group put them in check. And you know, of course, when a white supremacist feels powerless, first thing they do is go reaching for a gun. It's a matter of, well, if you go reaching for a gun, just make sure you're not wearing a badge. Because if you're wearing a badge, that's going to be a problem for you. That badge is not going to keep you from being punished. And in the case of that Pentland skinhead, he no doubt thought to himself, well, the people, they only come to protest at the cops' houses. I'm not a cop, so I'll fly under the radar. Nobody'll know. I'll fly under the radar. I'm so smart. And what the people showed him was, no, you can get it too. So that's what's going on now. That seems to be what the new trend is. Paying people a house call. But as you see with the case of Chauvin and with the case of Potter, look at the lengths that the city's willing to go to in order to back up these people. $9,000 plus to put barricades around an empty house. This is supposed to be something that I guess makes a statement of some sort. Yeah, the statement that it made is the people are paying too much in taxes. The citizens should sue that city. This is malfeasance. This is a waste of dollars. I mean, and you put 2 cop cars out in front. What the hell are the 2 cop cars going to do that the barricades won't, and vice versa? What the hell is a piece of some stone slabs and some chain link fence going to do that 2 white supremacists with guns aren't going to do? This is a waste. I guess to them, they're figuring that this makes a statement. Yeah, what the statement that it makes is that obviously the power of the people has reached them. They got the message. And the message is that if you go calling yourself gunning down unarmed people, then what's going to happen is nobody's going to City Hall anymore. Nobody's going to the police station anymore. They're making house calls now. And if you don't want a house call, it's real simple. Obey the law and nothing will happen.